Okay, for our next one, we're comparing angle FCD and BFC. All right, once again, we're looking to find that we have two sets of congruent sides. We do, all right, because the reflexive property. So we're looking at FCD, which is right here, and BFC, which is right here, okay? Looking at the sides opposite, we have the 3.6, we have the 3. And so our conclusion then is that this angle of BFC is greater than angle FCD. Now, there's not one correct way of starting it. Like if I wanted to write the angle FCD was less than angle BFC, that's a correct answer as well, okay? All right, now we're actually going to skip the next two. All right, they're the same type of stuff. All right, so we're going to skip these next two. All right. And we're now going to go to where it says, what are the limitations of the following? All right. So these might be some of the tougher ones to conceptually understand at first. Okay. But you have to kind of use your brain on this. All right. To make sure that what you're writing down makes sense with what you guys know about angles and sides. Okay. So when I'm talking about the limitations, what I'm talking about is what can they not exceed and what do they have to be above, all right? So for example, angles, what we know is that they have to be greater than 0. You can't have an angle that is equal to or less than 0, all right? So it has to be greater than 0, okay? Now, we also know, all right, that these angles have to be less than 180. Now, technically, it could be equal to 180, all right? But what we're talking about are angles within triangles. So obviously, they can't equal 180 degrees, all right? Because then that wouldn't leave any room for the other two angles, okay? So that's why I just said they have to be less than 180. Now, for sides, there's only one stipulation on this, and that is that the side has to be greater than 0. Okay, there's no upper boundary, all right, to the side lengths, meaning that they don't have to be less than something. They just have to be more than something, okay? All right, so for these two examples at first, what we're going to do is we're going to fill in some stuff, okay? So this angle, you're going to have to follow along, all right? Angle ABC is 65 degrees, okay? We have side length of AB is going to be 3. And side length of AC is going to be 4. All right. Side length of BD is going to be 2. While side length of CD is going to be 3. And then the last thing is that there's an expression for this angle of BCD. And that's going to be 4x minus 5 degrees. Okay. So what we need to do first, all right, is we once again need to find to make sure that we have two sets of congruent sides, which I do, all right? I have this 3 and this 3, all right, mark them congruent, and then I have BC is congruent to BC, all right? So the angles that we're looking at, all right, are the included angles, all right, within these two triangles, okay? Now, same idea, all right, with what we just did, all right, is we're going to now look at what's opposite of those. All right, so I'm going to look at the fact that the 4x minus 5 is opposite of the 2, and I'm going to look at the fact that the 65 is opposite of the 4, okay? So because I've done that, I know that this angle of BCD has to be less, all right, than that angle of ABC, all right? And because we have that expression for BCD is 4x minus 5, and I like to start with my expression. I'm going to start off with saying that 4x minus 5 has to be less than 65. Okay? All right, once again, I'm going to re-explain that. All right, I know that because this 4x minus 5 is opposite of the 2, and I know that this 65 is opposite of the 4, this angle right here has to be less than this angle up here, okay? So using the expressions that we're given, the 4x minus 5 has to be less than the 65, okay? Now, let's go ahead and solve that. All right, let's add the 5 over. And we're going to have 4x is less than 70, which means that x has to be less than 17.5, if my math is correct. But we're not done yet, all right, because you have to recognize that this 4x minus 5 represents an angle measure, right? And so what we're saying is that this angle has to be less than 65. But you have to think of all the possibilities. That an angle is less than 65 means it could be 60, it could be 30, but it could also be a negative number because negative numbers are less than 65. So we have to put another boundary on that, and we have to say, well, that angle of 4x minus 5 also has to be greater than 0. All right, because by saying that, we're saying that it cannot be a negative number. So we have to add in that extra stipulation, okay? So if that's the case, we're going to solve, and we're going to get 4x is greater than 5, which means that x is greater than 1.25. Which leaves me with the final answer of saying, well, then x has to be stuck in between 1.25 and 17.5. So that's our final answer for that. Okay? Let's try another one. All right, so this time we're going to come over here, okay? And I want you guys to mark that, and it's not going to be drawn to scale, so just stick with me, all right? That this side length of EF is going to be congruent to IG. This side length of FG is going to be congruent, like I said, not drawn to scale, to GH, okay? We're going to have that this angle is 57 degrees. Angle F is 57. While angle J is 41 degrees. This side length of EG is 12. While this side length of IH is the expression 3x minus 6. Okay, so let's go ahead and talk this one through. So what we have is we have two sets of congruent sides. Check. We got that one done. Okay. We now need to look at the included angles. So I have 57 and I have the 41. And let's look at the sides that are opposite of it. So this 3x minus 6 is opposite of the 41, while this side length of 12 is opposite of the 57. What that means is this 3x minus 6 has to be less than this 12. Okay, so 3x minus 6 has to be less than 12. Because 3x minus 6 is opposite of the 41, while the 12 is opposite of the 57. Okay, so we're going to solve this, and we're going to get 3x is less than 18, which means that x is less than 6. Okay. But here's the thing, guys, all right? We have that this 3x minus 6 has to be less than 12, all right, which means that the side length has to be less than 12. But negative numbers are also less than 12, right? So we now need to add in that extra stipulation that says, well, 3x minus 6 also has to be greater than 0. So solving that, we're going to get 3x is greater than 6, which means that x has to be greater, x has to be greater than 2. So your final answer for this is that x has to be stuck in between 2 and 6. Let's try another one, okay? So let's look at this picture, all right? We have 15 and 15, all right, significant, okay? We are now looking at this 72, and we're comparing that with the 2x minus 5, okay? So let's look opposite of that 72. Let's look opposite of that 2x minus 5, okay? So because the 2x minus 5 is opposite of the 15, and the 72 is opposite of the 23, I know that 2x minus 5 has to be less than 72. Okay, so solving that, all right, we're going to add that 5 over, and we're going to get 2x is less than 77. Dividing out that 2, we're going to get x has to be less than 38.5. Okay, Now, we're saying that 2x minus 5 has to be less than the 72, all right, which means it could be any number that's less than the 72, which includes the negative numbers. So then we also have to state then that 2x minus 5 has to be greater than 0. And when solving, we get x is, wow, that was bad math. X is greater than 2.5, which ultimately means that x has to be stuck in between 2.5 and 38.5. All right. Once again, guys, I'm going to stop there for time purposes, and then we're going to come back. We're going to do one more example, and then we'll see where that takes us.